Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Just when you think you've got this whole thing with the Israeli-Hamas war kind of figured out, or when you think it's kind of on a back burner, it's just kind of rolling into the background, something seems to happen and throws it back up into the foreground. And man, do we have that issue today. And to help us unravel all the things that are going on, we have show favorite Matthew Hoh, former State Department guy, currently the Associate Director of Eisenhower Media Network, and of course, combat Marine in the past. So he's really got all the credibility anyone can have, not the least of which, because you've been right on nearly everything you've been saying or writing for the last, decade and a half at least. So welcome back to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Danny. Although I know, like you, I'm the same way as you. I wish I was wrong.
We'd like for you to be able to say, well, we thought things were going to go in this bad direction, but it turned out they were actually really good. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I shouldn't have doubted the competency of our leaders. They were right. Well, no, that hasn't happened. So.
No, we haven't been able to say that for quite a long time, actually, painfully so. But let's look at this situation. Now, I want to kind of jump in here because there's lots of things going on here, a lot of chaos. There's things going on within the Gaza Strip, and there are things going on with outside of the Gaza Strip, which all have effect on the conduct of the war, and therefore it all has direct implications for American national security and for our own interest in the region. And not surprisingly, it's not going in a good direction. Now, many people would like to say, go hearkening back to 10/7 and the terrorist attack from Hamas against Israel and the horrible things that happened to all the civilian people, that, now Israel is going to use its strong military that we've helped provide funding for decades, and they're going to quash the guys who did this. But the problem is, as we talked about on many episodes before, it's almost impossible to be able to accurately identify for the Israeli military who the actual Hamas fighters are and who just the angry Palestinians are, because their way of life is getting wiped out and their family members are getting killed in the process. We'll talk about that in just a second. But first of all, I want to look at things that are going on outside the Gaza Strip, and then we'll come back to the inside here. Now, there has been lots of issues, as everyone knows now, with the attacks in the Red Sea by the Houthis. That's just messing up the gumming up the works there. We've had U.S. troops been attacked in Iraq and in Syria by some of these Iran-backed groups. And now then there's a renewed focus on what's going on with Iran, because Iran, it backs nearly all of these groups, whether it's, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, et cetera, and several others in the region as well. So that's going to come into play. But first of all, let's see what's going on with the Yemenis, because we've been saying that a lot of these attacks we've been making against the Houthis for their shipping, for their attacks on the Red Sea shipping, is meant to deter them. It's meant to degrade their capacity. And then, as you say, we don't want to get into a war with Yemen. We just want to open up the Red Sea. But let's see what the other side of that equation looks like. Let's see what Yemen thinks.
And in Yemen, the Houthis, they call themselves Ansarullah, have the advantage of location right on the Red Sea. I spoke to one of the group's top leaders.
The Biden administration has designated your group, the Houthis, as a terrorist organization. What is your reaction to that?
We would say to Biden, this label should be given to Netanyahu, he says.
Is there now a regional war underway between the United States and Iranian-backed groups, including your own?
Yes, as we said, America announced the war against us, he says.
So, Matt, first of all, let's just look at on that position. We say we're not at war with Yemen. We're not at war with the Houthis. We're just having punitive strikes, basically, against their capacity to launch attacks into the Red Sea. As soon as they stop, we're done. But the other side also has a vote, as they say, and they think that they are in a war. Right. What is that going to mean if one side thinks it's in a war and the other side is saying, yeah, I don't really want a war?
What it means is that you have you have an absence of strategic thinking occurring here. You have an absence of intellectual honesty, an absence of a situational clarity that's occurring, and you are waging war. In this case, the Americans, we are waging war against Yemen denying it's a war, but still waging war. So this gross doublespeak, like we've seen, say, in the case of what's happening in Gaza, where we are pushing the Israelis to protect civilians. We are telling the Israelis they have to follow the laws of war, follow international law. At the meantime, 3 C-17s full of bombs show up every day in Israel. You know what I mean? So that type of gross doublespeak, very Orwellian. And you know what that means then is what do you expect? What's going to occur from this? What type of catastrophe is going to unfold from this? If this is how we have entered into this war with this type of just real incompetence, of just disdain for the truth of the matter, then how can anyone expect this to go well? I mean, what I worry about, Danny, and I think you agree because we've seen this, right? You had your a celebrity, so to speak, because you had the guts to go to Congress in 2012 and say, look, the generals are lying to you about the Afghan war. And here's the proof. Here's our actual documents. They're saying A, B, and C, but this is actually what A, B, and C reads as. In the point I'm getting at is that both you and I know is that it's just not public relations. They're just not saying these things to, they're just not advancing the notions of progress, or that all is going to go well, or that we have a moral righteousness behind us, because that's good PR, that's good information operations.
Right.
The worry is, and we've seen this, is that this is what dominates the actual thinking, that any divergence from the narrative within the decision-making process is inexcusable. It's just not allowed.
So,
right. So when you have, right, I mean, so that's the fear, is that within the White House, people actually believe that what's occurring is what the public statements are. And I saw
That's
this,
troubling.
right? I mean, I just had a conversation not too long ago where I recalled my time being on the Iraq desk at the State Department in 2005, 2006. And I can tell you that's exactly how it was. During interagency meetings, so we have representatives from, all the different agencies involved in the war in Iraq, there was a truth that we all had to follow. And honest to God, the Office of the Vice President was in those meetings, and they enforced that truth. So this is in 2005. If you were to bring up that we are an occupying power in Iraq, and that's how we should now proceed forward in terms of how are we going to get ourselves out of this? How are we going to win? However you want, whatever your goals were, you had to take it from the reality that we're an occupying power. And the Office of the Vice President and others that were eager within the federal government to appease, that political leadership, enforced, we're not an occupying power. Nope, don't say that. You can't say that. It's not true. And then so you're basically going along with a fantasy world. You're going along with a fairy tale.
Yeah,
and
that can work when you're in an academic or administrative environment. When you're in the office building and you have a boss telling you that and your paycheck depends on it, then most people go, "Okay, cool, we're not." That works there. You can do that. It doesn't work on the ground. And so, what do you think is going to happen when the Houthis, who think they're in a war right now, the military firsters, all those people, I won't even call them neocons because it's really kind of cuts across a lot of the different aisles of the politics here. But those who are military firsters, who want to solve everything with military power, what they want to do here is to say, Yemen will be deterred, or they'll be stopped because I send enough missiles and enough bombs, and they're going to stop that. Now, let me just kind of remind people that, and you and I talked about this, I think the last time you were on our show, that Yemen has, back to at least 2015, of years and years of bombing from Saudi Arabia, much of which came from us. Both, we were supporting them even in that war here, and it never cowed them. They never were able to stop. But now then, people want to believe that we're going to fire a few missiles, and at some point, pretty soon, probably Yemen will stop. But here's what I'm asking you. Yemen thinks they're at war, as we just saw there from their leader here. Now, what do you think the prospects are that they're going to go, you know what? We've had like now 8 or 10 rounds of missiles. That's enough. All right, wave the white flag. What do you think they're actually going to do?
First, I really like the way you use that term, Danny, military firsters. I think I've got to remember to use that myself, because that's a really great way of describing who these people are who are in power, because it goes beyond the neocons, and you don't have to get tripped up trying to define, who exactly these people are. They're military firsters. Clear. That's it. I would say too, you look at this in the sense of, the NBC News clip where Richard Engel is asking that the Yemeni spokesperson about being a terrorist organization. And I have a feeling that the translation that was occurring there was off a bit, but just the idea that we're going to call them a terrorist organization. Doesn't matter if they control 80% of the Yemeni population, and that they are popular, and that, as you said, they just fought and basically won a 9-year war with the Saudis and the Emiratis. So what are they, this lack of understanding of the reality of the situation, the circumstances, means that we're going to have this magical thinking that, where in the real world would anybody say, yeah, because they threw some missiles at us, we're going to stop fighting, let alone a nation that just came out as winning in a 9-year war with American proxies. I mean, the Houthis are, Ansar Allah, they're not concerned about fighting us because they fought us already. Yeah. Everything the Saudis and the Emiratis did was done with American weaponry, using American intelligence and targeting, using American tactics. You think the Saudis and the Emiratis were making up their own things? Maybe they were following the American doctrine of warfare here. So
planes that we gave them and missiles that we gave them. So of course,
right.
It wasn't much different than us doing it ourselves.
And as well too, the Yemenis here are filling a void. They're the only ones who are stepping forward to do something about the genocide in Gaza, along with the South Africans and the International Court of Justice. But in terms of on the ground, real efforts, they're the only ones who are stepping forward to do this. And what they've done so far is to create this blockade, this mess for shipping in the Red Sea that hasn't killed or hurt anybody. The worst thing that's happened is that these crew members have gotten taken captive and they're stuck in Yemen, basically. That's the worst that's happened. Otherwise, stock prices for shipping firms and the cost of Volvos and, has gone up. That's the worst that's happened. And it's being done by a people that have defended their home against foreign invasion, that have unified a population, that is seeing a population through starvation and warfare. They are the victors of that war. They're the heroes to the bulk of the Yemeni people. And now they're heroes, not just to the Arab world, but to most of the world, who are cheering them on, saying, you're doing the right thing by trying to stop the war in Gaza by doing this naval blockade.
But now here's where it gets more complicated. I told you this whole thing. This is I could have called this the episode of chaos in the Middle East, and this is going to be the next tranche of that. So you got these military firsters trying to do that stuff right there with Yemen, and that has every expectation that it's going to founder and backfire. If anything else, it's already unified because Yemen was having. The Houthis were having some domestic problems inside governing, like every government does, and this is unifying a lot of that, right, making it easier for them. But we'll discuss that further. The next, though, thing is that so far they are the only ones doing something, but there's also the issue of Iran. Now, many people have been saying that we need to go hit Iran. We showed a clip here yesterday of General Kellogg on Fox News saying we need to step this up and start hitting some higher targets. Earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, I'm sorry, Mark Kansian of the Center for Strategic and International Studies was asked, can we deter Iran with some of our military actions, and especially if things get kinetic? And he had an interesting response.
Well, I think it's unlikely we'll be able to deter the Iranians from arming the Houthis. That's part of their regional strategy. They are, for many years, have been trying to dominate the area. They have a very expansionist ideology. They're a wealthy and powerful country. They've been using surrogates very extensively in places from Iran all around the Gulf area. They've been attacking Saudi Arabia. So they are not going to be deterred. On the other hand, they have used surrogates. They rarely intervene themselves.
So they're not going to be deterred, but that's not the message that the people like Jack Keane. Hope you've taken your heart medication before I play this, because I know it happens to both of us when he comes up here. But here's what he's saying again.
I've never seen anything quite like it, that this administration is so unwilling to confront who the major oppressor and aggressor is in the region, Iran, and the fact that they are pulling all the strings.
So we just talked about, Matt, the fact that Yemen had been fighting since 2015 at least, this nonstop war, and they were never defeated. So in some respects, you could say that they defeated the Saudis, even though they didn't beat them on a battlefield, they prevented them from defeating them. So, that's a version of success. Now, what happens if Keane finally gets his way? And he's been on almost daily beating the drums along with Senator Lindsey Graham. Let's hit Iran. Let's hit Iran. Let's hit Iran. Now, we had an attack just the other day, a couple of days ago, on our U.S. troops, where another one had a traumatic brain injury. And thank God no one was killed, but it's just rolling the dice until one finally does, I think. And then the pressure will really go up, because people like Keane and some of these others are saying the only reason Iran's doing this stuff and helping the Yemenis and helping the Hezbollah and all these other groups is because we don't go after them. And if an American dies, then we're going to have to go after them hard. I think there'll be a real chance that actually happens, because we have a lot of history doing that. My question is, based on all of your experience in this region and dealing with these kinds of groups, what do you think Iran is going to do? Are they going to get the message that Keane wants them to get, that the Yemenis haven't gotten, and say, all right, we're just going to back down now, and we're going to quit supporting all these groups? What is the likely outcome of hitting Iran hard?
Well, in hitting Iran in the way that Keane or Graham wants us to, launching, hundreds of sorties, thousands of missile and rocket attacks, destroying the entire Iranian Navy, bombing every airfield they have, et cetera, knocking out their electrical grid, what these monsters want, because that's really what you have to understand about people like Jack Keane and Lindsey Graham. They have no humanity in them. Keane joined the army because he wanted to exert power over other people. Lindsey Graham is a politician because he wants to exert power over people. I mean, I'm making his diagnosis of what's going on in these people's heads without being inside myself, but I'm pretty confident I can say that, because that's how we measure other people who have done similar things. It's just often that when it comes to measuring our own Americans, we tend to shy away from a rather two-dimensional understanding of them. But all the evidence that people like Keane and Graham give us are that they're monsters, and that they are just interested in exerting power over people, and punishing those who don't fit into their model. And so the Iranians, of course, their response would be to fight back. And the danger is that you have many Iranian hardliners who want the same things as Keane and Graham. They want a showdown.
So perverse.
Right. It is. I mean, you've got your Iranian Keanes and Grahams out there. You do. I feel like these guys meet up. Maybe they have a WhatsApp channel they're on or something like that, or a Telegram channel they're on where, hey, Jack, say this, and I'm going to say this tonight on the radio here in Tehran.
Oh,
and then,
boy.
like that kind of thing. They
Like it.
because there's such a lunacy, right? There's such a bloodlust in these people that, it's staggering. And so the idea that somehow we would launch this type of massive military campaign against Iran, and Iran would just say, okay, we were wrong, we're sorry, please don't do it again. The likelihood of that is there's no likelihood of that. But the likelihood of a larger regional war that could bring in Russia, because now there's talks of Russia and Iran forming a security pact, which, historians would say this is amazing. What the Americans have done here in bringing Moscow and Tehran together is absolutely amazing. This is a feat of world history that we've seldom seen before, but
we're on the history of us already seeing that we gave basically Iraq into Tehran.
Exactly.
We were enemies, and now we've turned Iraq almost into a vassal state, but I digress.
Yeah, right. I mean, so the idea that, and then all the repercussions of that, what would occur in Iraq, what would occur in Syria, what would occur in Lebanon, the extensions of Iranian power, how they would fight us. And the thing about the Iranians is that for the last I'd say 30 years or so, once they got out of that awful Iran-Iraq war, they were able to focus the United States as their primary foe. So Iranian planning over the last decades has been entirely with the United States as its primary adversary. So their ideas of how to fight us, their observations of us, the way they have trained and equipped their forces have all been done in a manner to make a war with the United States, if not winnable, at least not in the sense that they will be completely destroyed. I think what you'd see, Daddy, in the first week or two or something like that, is you would see widespread destruction of Iranian equipment, of Iranian ships, craft facilities, because that's what the U.S. is good at.
Yep.
And on day 9, we'd be the same type of thing, wondering, why is this still going on? How come they haven't given up yet? You know, in the same way we're doing it with the Houthis. We've launched how much? About $1 billion worth of weaponry at the Houthis so far, right?
And let me just have a slight diversion here, because we're going to get back to, we're going to transition back over to the inside the Gaza Strip issue in a second, which is really eye-opening in some regards. But look, let's say that we actually get into that situation here. Here's the situation on the ground already with regards to the U.S. ability to sustain combat operations. We're sending and have sent millions of shells and a bunch of other stuff to Ukraine for a long time, for 2 years now. And even though there's no more money been allocated, we're still finding ways to send stuff over there. We're sending stuff to, like you said a minute ago, plane loads of stuff to Israel every day. Now we're shooting a bunch of stuff into the Red Sea and knocking missiles down there when they come in, and we're attacking missile sites on the ground in Yemen. At the same time, we're also accelerating our anti-aircraft systems in Iraq and in Syria to protect our troops on the ground from all of those attacks that are coming on as well. At the same time, we're trying to send more weapons in the same categories of missiles and stuff to Taiwan in the Asia Pacific area. Now, you then add in a sustained conflict with Iran, where we have to start doing a whole lot of that. Matt, our inventories aren't that big. Those things are going to be drained in no time. Now, what happens if something, God forbid, where we actually get sucked into an actual war with whether it's a Russia, China, North Korea, something like that? We don't have the ability to sustain war for ourselves. We're depleting our own national security here. That's why one of the reasons I'm so alarmed by this.
Right. And it would only take one other power doing something to cause, the type of collapse, right? So you wouldn't need the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans and the Venezuelans and the Cubans and whoever the boogeymen are that you're worried about in this circumstance. You wouldn't need them all to act. You would just need one of them to act to make it so that the American military was completely overextended and that we would take losses. I mean, these destroyers and these cruisers don't hold that many rounds of munitions, right? They just don't. And our resupply efforts are very vulnerable. We've seen that. I saw yesterday that the Iranians said they'd attacked one of the American military's cargo ships that was in the Red Sea. That's there because that's where, when the destroyers fire off all their SM-2s and the cruisers fire their Tomahawks and everything, these cargo ships have to go up to refill them. And those things are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
We just don't have the ships like we have. We don't have I forget how many ships we had in World War II to provide some type of escort, right? We don't have thousands of ships to provide the escort that we need to all these ships that are vulnerable. Then you have a further isolation that's occurring here. So again, you get to day 9, day 10, we've overextended ourselves. We've destroyed a lot of Iranian equipment, but they were expecting that. And now what happens? And I think what you see, though, then is a further isolation of the U.S. So maybe in the short term, it's great. There's Richard Engel and NBC's gloating over video of destroyed Iranian fighter jets and sinking Iranian Navy ships, right? And Iranian buildings on fire. But what happens after that? And so this idea that
if Iran doesn't capitulate, they don't stop and they keep going on.
They don't. And then there's even another strategic or political level to this as well, where you're seeing the United States become more and more isolated. Right. We've talked about this before, and we're seeing the success of, say, organizations and movements, alliances, if you will, like the BRICS. You're telling me that the United States beating up on Iran on behalf of Israel, which is this is all about, knowingly throwing the Middle East into complete chaos and instability, doing something so foolhardily and foolish that somehow is going to improve the United States standing with the rest of the world. The rest of the world isn't going to hasten their desire to get away from the U.S. Because we're a danger to everybody. Right. It's only a matter of time until the Americans either directly or because of their actions indirectly cause us great harm like they're doing in the Middle East right now. And so, I mean, the strategic folly of this, as well, then, too, people think, well, because it's the Iranians, the Saudis would be on our side. I don't think so. I think the Saudis have gotten to the point, and we saw this last year where they had that rapprochement with Iran that was done through the Chinese, where the Saudis value security and stability, and they don't see that from the U.S. So who do they look to? China. China is going to be our guarantor in the Middle East of security and stability. So as the United States does these things to try and maintain control and power, in the short term, maybe it does by grasping so tight, but in the mid and long term, it's causing problems that are further weakening it and eroding what power it does have. Yeah. And I think is a standard for any declining empire, this type of falling apart, right?
Unfortunately, we have. And now, I'm going to shift gears here because we're running short on time, and I don't want to miss this part here. Now we're going to look at the issue inside the Gaza Strip, inside the Hamas-Israel war. And things have taken an interesting turn. Really, just the last 24 hours, there have been a couple of developments whose outcome is unclear and how it's going to impact all these things that are going on even outside. And that is, let's show you this clip yesterday. But there has been an issue. The talk about the Israeli hostages has kind of moved to the side and actually been moved off. Everybody's talking about whatever happens this day and whatever gets blown up. And at least in the Western press, the U.S. press, there hasn't been a lot of focus on that. But I assure you, in Israel, there has been a hell of a lot of focus on it, as this clip right here shows what's going on inside the Israeli parliament.
A 2-month pause in fighting in exchange for the release of the roughly 130 hostages still in Gaza. News of the proposal coming hours after hostage families stormed a parliamentary committee demanding action from the government. Among them, grandfather Gilad Korngold. "You will not sit here while our children die," he shouts.
Now, that was just amazing, which is not surprising in the least, because, look, there probably could have been deals made to get the hostages back a long time ago. And I think Israel would have had to pay a price for it, but they could have gotten them back, and it wouldn't have cost them anything in the security fund because the war, frankly, would have continued on. But they seemed unconcerned about their people, both the ones that are hostages as well as their family members. And now the family members have finally said, I've had enough of that. And so you see, they took extraordinary measures to do that. Now, what was reported by both NBC and Al Jazeera and actually several others after that was that Israel was proposing, their government was saying they're proposing a 2-month pause while they get the hostages back. And then whether or not Hamas would agree to that, there was some conflicting reports even on that. But that's now actually what they were thinking. But then this morning, there was a second issue there that Israel suffered a huge battle loss. Up to 25 soldiers were killed in a single 24-hour period, which was, shocking to the Israeli people, which is now throwing even more concern among the population, as you see in this report.
Around 4 p.m., terrorists fired an RPG at a tank securing the force. Simultaneously, an explosion caused the collapse of two-story structures with the force inside and nearby. It's believed that the explosion was most likely caused by the explosives laid down by our forces to demolish that infrastructure. The IDF has opened an inquiry into the tragedy. Following the incident, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu underlined the need to learn the necessary lessons from the incident and do everything to safeguard the lives of our soldiers. The Prime Minister noted the IDF's great achievements in this war that Hamas started, including completing the encirclement of Khan Yunis today, and acknowledged the very heavy costs our country is paying. He added that while we bow our heads in memory of the fallen, we are not relenting even for a moment in striving toward the goal to which there is no alternative: total victory over Hamas, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Together we will fight, and together we will win."
So, number one, you see on there that that the Hamas side is not a bunch of hapless guys with machine guns that are just getting bombed or they're starting to be very effective in their combined and sophisticated attacks. So this is not as easy on Israel as they may have thought. And it implies that this is going to take a long time. It's not anything that's going to be over quick. But then in that same press conference, Elon there said that despite what was reported the night before, that they're looking for the Israeli government is potentially considering a 2-month pause / ceasefire, whatever word you want to use. He seemed to shoot that down when he said this.
The goals of this war, as laid out by the War Cabinet after the October 7th massacre and handed down to the IDF, remain unchanged. The destruction of Hamas's governing and military capabilities in the Gaza Strip and the return of all the hostages. There will be no ceasefire that leaves the hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power. Beyond that, we have nothing to elaborate.
Now, maybe he's being careful with his words. There'll be no ceasefire that leaves hostages in Gaza. Maybe he's saying that, but there'll be a ceasefire if we get the hostages back. I'm not really clear, but they keep keeping that same focus on there that, no, we're still going to destroy Hamas, however long it takes. We're going to keep doing whatever we need to do in total victory, as Benjamin Netanyahu said in a separate press conference today when he was discussing this himself. Is Israel, Matt, going down a military path that can't be accomplished?
Yeah, it's worrisome because you watch and you listen to Netanyahu and then others within his government, and the use of the word victory is appearing over and over again. It is every paragraph that's being uttered has the word victory in it, and it shows a mentality that is committed to something that's ideological. That's just frankly not possible. It just doesn't match up. Victory in the sense of what? Eradicating every last member of the Palestinian resistance, which is basically the entirety of the populations. All 2.3 million people in Gaza have to be subjugated in some form or another, either by cleansed, removed, and put off in some far off land, or eradicated, destroyed. I mean, because how else can you achieve victory in this sense? The whole of human history teaches us that an occupied people will resist violently against that occupation. And the Israelis know this. And that's why you've seen so many Israeli former generals saying, hey, this is not going to produce the outcome that they're saying. The only way to get the hostages back and the only way to have a security and stability is through negotiations. And, and your heart breaks watching these hostages' families, because these people are just being used as pawns. I mean, the horror of having people being held hostage, but then to add the dissonance of watching your government very clearly, overtly use them as pawns. And put forward this idea of victory, whatever that means, whatever this nebulous and unable to achieve victory over the lives of your loved ones, and knowing too that the only way hostages have come home have been through negotiations, right? And that Hamas hasn't killed any hostages. The IDF has killed the hostages. I mean, you can make the argument that, it's because Hamas is holding them. But the idea being is that Hamas had no intention of murdering these people. And actually, over the weekend, Hamas put out this 19 page document explaining, it's a PR thing, but explaining their actions on October 7th. And in it, they very clearly say the purpose of this was to take hostages to exchange for the Palestinians being held in Israeli jails, the hostages the Israelis have taken. So, I mean, it was very clear what the motives of Hamas were in all this, and that it wasn't to kill the Israelis, but to take them hostage. And of course, October 7th didn't go that way, but that seems to have been what the strategy was. Right. And so I guess you can make the argument for the Israelis of, well, we don't want to go along with what Hamas's strategy is here. Only a fool would do what they're at. But what they're pursuing, though, is so unwise, so strategically unsound, and such a moral horror that you say whatever gains can be made in the short term will be completely obliterated by the mid and long-term consequences. And now, Danny, we've seen where we've reached a point in this war and this genocide where the Israelis aren't even receiving that many short-term successes, right? So the short-term success they would get from their troops going into Gaza, avenging October 7th, planting the Israeli flag, those kinds of things are now being overtaken by the bad news. 24 dead today.
And that's a press conference. They said that was now brought up to over 500 killed in action. And we don't know for sure how many have been wounded, but some reports have it in the several thousands on top of that. A lot of whom have lost limbs and whatnot. We've been seeing in almost all these modern wars. You
right,
also
and that's a level of casualties. That's a level of casualties the Israelis are not accustomed to.
Oh, absolutely.
Not
They've
for
never had it.
15 years.
And they have all their not National Guard, their reserve forces who have been called up. And now that it's like, will they ever be sent back? And they're having to now pull them off the line because politically they can't sustain it at home. Economically, they can't keep that many people of a small population that they have out of work and sustain it and pay for this indefinitely. This just isn't going to work very much longer, I don't think.
Israel is a small nation. It requires a lot of inputs. So this is why the Red Sea blockade has been so effective, why the Americans got so upset about it, right? Because it is hurting the Israelis. They've only got 3 ports. You take one of them offline, wow, that's really going to do a number on your economy. Plus, too, Israel's a nation that foreign investment has been key, whether it was the American foreign investment from the U.S. government in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, or the stuff, that I think a lot of people would associate with the tech companies, the technology industry in Israel. That foreign investment has really kind of been ratcheted back these last several months because investors aren't so sure about putting their money into Israel. And then there's other aspects of the economy that are having problems. And then you've got how many 100,000 people from the north of Israel and 100,000 people from the south of Israel who are basically homeless now living. I mean, like there's all kinds of things that make this a much deeper and problematic story for the Israelis, other than simply what's happening in Gaza, which of course is itself an epic. And
I haven't even talked about it yet, but I think it may have been you on the show last week. We talked about how Israel leaders, many of them are giving signs that they have a plan to attack Hezbollah.
Right.
Not that they're worried about a northern attack, but that they may go in themselves and do it. Now, just imagine if you add that additional front to all this, how much more chaos that's going to bring and how much more likely it is that Iran gets into this. I mean, every way you look at it, this is just not going in ways that's going to help Israel.
And this is what we can see. Right, Danny? This is what we can see. This is what we can see happening right now. That's clear. It's not deniable. I can go and look it up on Business Insider or in Bloomberg, right? This is what's happening now. And we don't see, though, or what are those consequences of the war that were not foreseen, that were not intended. And, particularly when we're talking about Lebanon, it's so important for people to remember that Hezbollah did not exist until the Israeli invasion and occupation of Lebanon. What comes out of that 82 invasion, besides like the increased warfare and the wreckage of a nation and a nightmare for the Israeli army in Lebanon, is the creation of Hezbollah. When Israel goes into Lebanon after the Palestinian militants, the Shia population are actually a little bit excited to see the Israelis because they don't like the Palestinians that are there. But very quickly, the Shia population of southern Lebanon are occupied people. And what comes from that? Hezbollah. What are the unintended consequences of it? What's going to come out of this that we haven't even foreseen or even can contemplate?
Doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, we don't know.
Coming in there. Well, I can tell you one thing, that we are going to continue to follow those operations here and those developments, and we're going to continue to make sure that you're aware of things as they develop, just like we gave you breaking news today, so that you're on top of all this. And we're going to keep bringing folks like Matthew Ho in that can help you make sense of it all. And Matt, thank you for coming on again today and providing a little bit more clarity into something that's very chaotic. And we can only hope and pray that some kind of sanity and wisdom will come over the leaders of these various countries that can bring this nightmare for the Palestinian people and even the Israeli people to a quick end.
Thanks, Danny.
All right. Thank you. And we appreciate you guys for coming with us, and ask you to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We're going to remain unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the information you need to make sense of your world. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.